Shooting concerts can be really tricky. For one, you don't have a lot of light, and if you do, it's often changing on you. Two, the musicians like to move all around the stage, and on top of all of that, you might not have a lot of time to shoot, and you might not have many options for where you can shoot from. So, if you're thinking about getting into concert photography, stick around because I have some tips to help get you started. Let's start off with the most important decision that you're going to have to make: which lenses you want to shoot with. There are a lot of factors that come into play when deciding which lenses you want to bring. So my advice is do a lot of homework on the venue that you're going to be shooting at before the gig. Try to find out how long you have to shoot. Some bands may only grant you access to shoot the first 1 or 2 songs, while other bands may grant you access to shoot the entire show. Also, try to find out where you're going to be shooting. Are you stuck in one small area the entire night, or do you have the freedom to wander around the entire venue? Also, I suggest looking up images from previous events at the same venue to try to get an idea of what the lighting situation is like. It may or may not be helpful since lighting can change from night to night and band to band, but you may get lucky and you may get some helpful insights by doing that. If you find out that you only have a short amount of time to shoot, then you're going to have to work as efficiently as possible, and zoom lenses are what you're going to want to use. You won't have time to be swapping lenses. I suggest getting a range of zoom lenses. If you can afford the Holy Trinity, which is a 16-35, a 24-70, and a 70-200, then that will be enough to cover pretty much any scenario you come across. I also suggest that you get the fastest lenses possible. So for zoom lenses, shoot for something that's f2.8 or faster. If the venue is not well lit, and oftentimes they're not, and you have a lot of time to shoot, then I highly suggest going for some fast prime lenses. Most venues are pretty dark, and in general, musicians like to move around a lot on stage, so having a faster lens will let you keep your shutter speed appropriately high without having to crank your ISO. Remember that an f1.4 prime lens is 2 stops faster than an f2.8 zoom lens and will let in roughly 4 times the amount of light. What this means for you is, assuming the same shutter speed, if you shoot with an f1.4 lens, you'll be able to use an ISO value that's 1/4 the value that you would have had to use with an f2.8 lens, which means that you'll get a much cleaner image. I get good coverage with 1 wide, 1 medium, and 1 tele lens. Remember, prime lenses do let in a lot more light, but the trade-off is efficiency. The more lens changes you have to do, the higher your chances are of you missing a special moment on stage. One piece of advice I have for you is try to be familiar with the band's music that you're going to be shooting. If you know when the high energy parts of the songs are coming, you're more likely to be ready to capture those really cool moments. All right, let's talk a little bit about camera settings. So when I'm shooting concerts, I almost exclusively shoot in aperture priority mode. You can shoot in manual, but the lighting changes so often that you're going to really struggle to keep up. You'll want to set your minimum shutter speed to something appropriate for capturing the action on stage at that time. I usually start around 1/125th of a second and adjust accordingly from there. I shoot on a Sony a7 IV, which is really good in low light, so I try not to worry too much about noise. If you lower your ISO too much or decrease your shutter speed too much because you're so worried about noise, then you risk getting out of focus and blurry shots. I would much rather get in-focus shots that have a little bit of grain than getting no shot at all. On top of all that, the Sony a7 IV and many other cameras on the market are ISO Invariant. If you don't know what ISO Invariant is, I did a whole video about it. I'll link it up here and down below in the description if you want to check it out. From a high level, ISO Invariance just means that whether you increase your exposure in camera with ISO or if you increase it later in post, you'll still end up with the same amount of noise. So I always prefer to increase my exposure in camera with ISO because autofocusing systems work better when you're not severely underexposed. Depending on what metering mode you use, you may have to use your exposure compensation dial to help bring down the highlights, especially when artists are getting blasted in the face by stage lights. I also suggest using zebras so that way you can see which parts of your image are being blown out. For my focusing mode, I use continuous autofocus with IAF enabled, and I control the focus box using the joystick on the back of the camera for quick composition changes. I always shoot uncompressed RAW, so I have the most flexibility in post, but I understand that some people have really tight deadlines, so in that case, you may want to shoot RAW plus JPEG. I don't use Flash at shows. Flash would be great, but I try to be respectful of the musicians because I know it can be pretty annoying to have flashes going off in your face all night. If you know the band personally that you're shooting, ask them if you can use Flash because I think it could really help. White balance can be tricky to set because most venues are going to have multicolor lights going off all the time. So what I typically do is when I get to the venue, I set my white balance by eye as close as I can get it, and I stick with it the whole night. That way, when I get back to my computer in post, I can just adjust all the images by the same amount. As opposed to if you were to use something like auto white balance, then all of your images are going to be all over the place, and it's going to be a nightmare to adjust. One last piece of advice that I have for you is actually a word of caution. Be aware of lasers. Lasers can and will damage your image sensor, so try not to be in a place where lasers can directly enter into your lens because it'll be a really bad day for you. All right, well, I think that's it. I won't get into editing because this video will get way too long. In general, I find that concert photos don't need a whole lot of editing because it's a naturally contrasty environment. So the photos, even the raw photos, come out looking pretty good by themselves. I will note that sometimes, and it can't be helped, sometimes the subject will get blasted by a bright red light or a purple light or something, and it'll make the colors look really weird, it'll make the skin look weird, and that's a good time when you may want to go to grayscale or black and white for that photo. So just a quick tip. Anyway, I hope you guys found the video useful. I love shooting concert photography. As a musician and a photographer, I love the idea of blending two of my passions, getting out there and having fun. And on top of that, I find that musicians and artists really like to get good pictures of themselves. So they always post your pictures, they tag you, they're super happy to get them, and it's a really cool, fun process. So I hope you guys get out there and start shooting some concerts and having some fun. If this is your first time here, my name is Matt. I make videos about photography, video, I do gear reviews, all kinds of good stuff. So if you don't want to miss any future videos, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps me out a lot. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.